Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Wednesday, February 26, 2025. Out of the matrix into prime reality. It's quite the journey. Sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 0 steps back, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And today, I'd like to welcome you all, of course, on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Thank you to a wonderful moderator, Ronnie, is with us today. Of course, Christine, the wise thumbs in the live chat, and everyone else, thank you for being here with us. Today, I'd like to talk about a concept that, I call the great sleeping. And I have to correct first a previous statement that I've made many times where I said that this awakening journey usually only goes in one direction. Well, people, begin questioning things wherever they start, and they question more and more and more and more and more, and they go deeper and deeper and deeper. Now that recently I was proven wrong. There is a counter movement happening, and I call it the great sleeping. And in a nutshell, we're going to dive deep into how it works, how it's being affected, how that plays into the timelines, by the way, that we've heard so much about, and why this subject matters more than anything else. But in a nutshell, there are millions, I mean millions of people who have been questioning corruption, who've been questioning how the system operates, who've been questioning what's in their food, who've been questioning what's in the water, who've been questioning what's in the air. What are those weird stripes in the skies, those white weird trails that we all know are filled with chemicals that shouldn't be in there? We don't know why barium, aluminum, and so forth are in there. It goes into the soil, and people have been questioning that. And the people come from all movements that have been questioning that. They are, they're Christian, they're more broader spiritual people. They are of all ethnicities and races. They are conservatives, they're liberals, they're libertarians, they're non-political, everybody. And the greatest sleeping means that something happened. They either observed something happened in the outside, and they started pulling back. They started getting more passive. They started going slower on that, not going deeper into the bigger questions, who they are, why they're here, how this relates to the world that we live in. So I want to break down how the greatest sleeping works, and I want to make one thing abundantly clear. Most of you know this famous interview that Carrie Cassidy, and I think at that point it was still with Bill Ryan, Project Camelot. You might remember them. They were, part of the pioneers in the new era of the internet, coming out with these whistleblower interviews, and they did a fantastic job. And so Carrie Cassidy and Bill Ryan back in the day interviewed this guy called Bill Woods. A lot of controversy around him, including allegations into improper, behavior, and maybe even, we don't know, if those allegations were true, sexual abuse. I can't speak to that. We went deep into the rabbit hole, but I never, ever got full confirmation of that. But that's not the point, unfortunately. I mean, it is the point, but the point of his particular statement really that stuck with everyone was that they have this technology, the looking glass technology, which Frank Jacob and I discussed a lot, and that the looking glass technology was used by the self-appointed elites to project scenarios into the future and to see how they would play out. And so they could play out things and then, do things that would get them their preferred outcome. And before the year 2012, in the years leading up to that, apparently, according to Bill Woods, that technology showed a singular timeline would appear, and that none of these things, no matter what they did, it could not change the outcome any longer. That this awakening timeline was happening. Now, probably from a 40,000 foot view, I'd say that's probably true, but it doesn't mean that these folks are stopping. They're using every tool that they've developed over hundreds and thousands of years. They have the greatest library of knowledge about the human species, the human behavior, and psychology. And so they're hanging on for dear life means they're using every tool at their disposal to stop the awakening of human consciousness, the changing of our perception about ourselves and the world that we live in, the changing of our perception about the control system that we live in. And if they can influence that, they will influence that. And it is working to a degree. That's why we're observing this weird movement among people who are usually the question everything crowd and the challenge everything crowd. And here's been my approach and our approach since I can think. We don't do organizations, we don't do parties, we don't do clubs, we don't join a group of people to be engaged in groupthink and to have a false sense of loyalty towards that groupthink. If the truth, and here's the shirt, I got the shirt to prove it. I'm a truth seeker. Here you go. My wife created that shirt. If the truth is your true north, if that's your guiding light, you question everything. You question everyone. You don't go and just blindly believe because somebody does a good thing. Oh, that's it. They're good. We don't need to worry about this any longer. But this is exactly what we're observing in millions of people right now. They're not taking things sort of on a case-by-case basis. You are immediately labeled if you question what these folks in power are doing, how they're doing it, where they're moving towards. And so let me break out this great asleeping because, and here's my eternal quest. Just like with most of you, something begins with an intuition. You have a feeling about something. And then you sort of go and walk with that. And you observe some things, but it's still just an intuition. And then when you see it over and over again, you start going deeper into it and you start looking at the patterns or the psychology. And this is what Christine and I have been doing. We're studying patterns, we're studying systems, and we have been studying them for a very, very long time. Because only when we truly comprehend ourselves and our behaviors and our psychology can we actually do something about it. So we need to step out, be willing to question ourselves, our behaviors, but also, of course, question everything around us. So let's look into this great asleeping and what that might be. So there are multiple ways to bring this about in the people. And believe me, they're very sophisticated in that. One approach is the psychological soft lockdown. It's the problem reaction neutralization equation. So awareness of societal corruption is allowed. This is what we've seen. We're no longer in the stage where the media and the politicians and the system is telling us that it's all just in our heads. A lot of things are being acknowledged openly. So awareness of societal corruption is allowed, but carefully managed and contained. People are guided toward pre-approved narratives and solutions that diffuse real resistance. This is the brilliant buildup of the new quote-unquote alternative media, the new alternative mainstream media, really. And once again, if you have stepped into this movement or into this questing and awakening in the 2020s, then you might not see this clearly. But if you had been around for a few decades, then you would see that there is a coherence in this movement now. It's cross-promoting each other, those podcasters and shows that you could generally, if you want to label it, generally label them in the MAGA or the conservative, at least they label themselves conservative camp, the MAGA conservative truth media. But really, they have their set of talking points, they have their set of topics, they have their set of solutions. So you can show a lot of the corruption and the stuff and that's going on, as long as people are being funneled towards those voices who are going to give them a certain perception. That is the first step. Mental occupation versus physical inaction. People become highly informed but take little real-world action, trapped in cycles of information consumption, online debates, and passive observation. So this is another thing. When you organize the resistance, even if you come from a pure intent, but these people don't. But even when you come from pure intent, when you organize the resistance, the organizational structure begins to become very important. So, a lot of different media companies pop up, and a lot of conglomerates pop up, and a lot of collaborations. Nothing bad about that, but it keeps that loop going. Versus, okay, what are the real life things that people actually do? And this is what I'm always missing in this entire new alternative media camp. Is their solution is basically vote for this guy, support this guy. Let's see what this guy's going to do. It seems to be a good billionaire, whatever. And then that leads us to the savior complex trap, where masses are led to believe external heroes will fix everything, reinforcing passivity. The more they follow centralized leadership figures, the less they take responsibility for personal and local change. And this has been the greatest sleeping. And why is that? Because ultimately, the perception is being kept within the system's thinking. So you have these awakeners, people that question stuff. And, I'm largely not talking to the people who are watching this, but your family, your friends, it might be a lot of those. And they've seen the corruption, they've seen the lies, they've seen the deception, like I said. But they're still systems thinkers. So they still think, well, we've had all these corrupt people. Now, if we get a real guy in, if we get the good guys in, that's going to work out. They're going to do it because they're still programmed with the idea that all the solutions that they need are outside of them. And that, as long as you have that perception in people, it's not hard to steer them. You simply need to give them something that looks shiny and sounds good and does a few things that they really agree with. That's all that you need to get people involved in a new camp. Think of sports teams too, right? I mean, people can hate on a coach and hate on an entire team that they've supported all their lives, but as soon as they bring in a new coach, that coach says the right things, does a few good moves, everybody's on board again. Never questioning whether there's a bigger problem behind the scenes. Oh, this one triggers a lot of people. I'm just, after I explain this, you're going to see the unsubscribe button go, and they're going to hit it hard. That's okay. The spiritual passivity psyop. It's a big one that they pulled out a long time ago. Raise your vibration and ignore the tyranny. Just ignore it. Just raise your vibration. It's all you got to do. Awakening is diverted into disengagement from the real world, where passivity is mistaken for wisdom. And this is, and when I say real world, it's the physical world, it's the construct, but we exist in this construct. We have physical avatars. Those physical avatars have some basic needs and necessities that need to be met to keep them going. So the spiritual psyop goes, hey, raise your vibe, ignore all of that. Where your attention goes, energy flows, all the platitudes. And so people that have really good thinking, people that have really good intentions, people that have a good heart and that develop their, capabilities are shying away from doing some really physical things and actions and taking some measures and creating some change because they don't want to get involved in that. And I'm not necessarily just talking about politics, but acknowledging on a bigger scale the concept of truth. Everything is just an illusion, so do nothing. Well, isn't it interesting that those who have given us the idea, or those who have come before us who've studied these fields and go, hey, this might not be real, whether that's the Bill Coopers of the world or, the George Carlins of the world, they were more in an entertainment, well, George Carlin for sure, or the David Ikes or the Jordan Maxwells and all the others, right? And of course the spiritual traditions, right? The Maya, the Great Illusion, they show us that. But those folks are never saying do nothing. They're never saying just ignore it. The gurus, by the way, the great gurus, those who have really gone back to original perception and design and wisdom, I mean, they literally pushed out this message before enlightenment, before you remember who you really are, chop wood and carry water. But after you realize who you really are, chop wood and carry water. They didn't say don't do that. They sweep the floors. They clean the windows. They understand the all approaching comprehensive approach here. Higher consciousness means surrender. The idea of detaching from suffering is distorted into accepting oppression as a spiritual lesson, keeping people from resisting control structures. This has been a big one, which is I've also discussed many times, where people say, listen, you walk in higher consciousness, just surrender to this. This is still our evolutionary process. We still need to go through this. We still need to have these kinds of leaders that take strong actions, that have a lot of power. That's just the reflection here. And I go, really? Or is it a really good story to keep people from saying, well, I'm not playing anymore. I'm not playing along. I'm not complying with this. Because what does it mean when I comply? Whom am I hurting? Whose freedom am I taking away? Well, my own sovereignty. So the spiritual passivity psyop is a really big one. And I have seen some communities who have individually and collectively gone through an awakening to this, to realize, oh my God, like we've been brainwashed into this. And they saw the light and they started to become fully integrated human beings again. And then there are those who double down and they just go full on, oh no, we won't engage in anything in the world. This is all non-spiritual stuff. We won't get into anything. We won't look at these things. And boy, do these folks have a rough awakening coming their way. Psychological warfare and the manipulation of perception. Listen, I'm just, I just want to stop this for a moment just to tell you how strongly I feel about the importance of comprehending this, because to me, and this is me, maybe you might be wired differently, but to me, if I can't wrap my mind around something, if I just feel it intuitively, but I never go deeper, I have a hard time even understanding myself or my own decisions or actions. I have to think about this. I have to see the patterns. And this is, you saw this beautiful meme that we had in the intro, not a conspiracy theorist, but a pattern recognizist, whatever, but someone who recognizes patterns. If you see them, and the most powerful things you could see are your own patterns of programming, right? So the system prevents mass consciousness expansion by trapping people in predictable psychological states. Like I said, billions and hundreds of billions of dollars and hundreds of years went into studying the human psyche. They know us better than we know ourselves. I can guarantee that on a larger scale. So the submission mode, fear and disempowerment, overload people with existential doom, wars, pandemics, economic collapse. I mean, when was the last time that we were out of that cycle? Do you remember even 5 years? 5 years where we didn't have constant bombardment with this is the next health scare, this Ebola, COVID, bird flu, all the other crap, wars, bombings, terror attacks, knife attacks, open borders, fentanyl a fentanyl crisis, wars all over the place, sending young folks, strong young people into places they never should be to die. I mean, when was the last time we had a period of 5 years that was sort of calm, where people go about their lives not being pulled and pushed into a million directions. Well, that, my friends, is fear makes people seek external protection, deferring their sovereignty. It's a natural thing that we go, if there is a problem constantly that seems bigger than ourselves, then the solution we think is bigger than ourselves. So it must be the government, it must be the president, it must be someone outside of us. Well, what if I told you that 95% of the problems are fully created and would never exist if some psychopathic, inverted consciousness bastards didn't spend their entire lifetime into plotting these things, and that 95% of the time nothing would be going on? 5% of the time, yeah, I mean, we are in a human experience, there's going to be shit, but 95% of the problems are completely fabricated. They have real life effects, because when I say fabricated, I'm not saying they're just putting it on the screen. They go and drop freaking bombs. They go and make people sick through their various means. They go and put food, poisons into food and whatnot. But these are created problems. They're consciously created to keep us in this submission mode. Anger and controlled opposition. This is a really big one when it comes to the greatest sleeping. And once again, we're talking about the concept of people go through the grade, they awaken. Oh, now we have the good guys in charge. Now they're here. We don't need to worry. And then they fall down into the greatest sleeping again. They start to become passive again. They forget about the journey they were on. Anger and controlled opposition. That's the containment mode. That's such a big one. Those who wake up are redirected into pre-approved resistance movements that create the illusion of opposition while staying within system-approved boundaries, whether that's organizations. You know, how many times have we seen those petition organizations that then we found out were all either Soros-sponsored or Council on Foreign Relations sponsored, World Economic Forum sponsored, Bill Gates sponsors, the change.org, and all these things that keep people running in a loop. And they don't understand that they stay standing still because they're being had. And that's why I can't say this enough. This is a world where we need to be educated and streetwise and educated and conscious, because deception is at every corner. Okay? An example, loud but ineffective political movements, endless cycles of social media outrage. I mean, how much of the how many of these MAGA movements, and not just MAGA movements on the left, just the same, were very loud. And by the way, on the right, I will say they're usually not destructive. It's a different mindset, right? You don't have the equivalent of BLM, where people that are more of a conservative mindset will go and riot and destroy shit. I mean, they're really intelligent enough to go, I'm not going to destroy my own neighbor's building. But you meet people where they're at. And how many of these movements have gained great momentum? You've seen a lot of things online. The Freedom Convoy in Canada, right? I mean, it was a fantastic movement. But it was very quickly co-opted. It was very quickly infiltrated. It was very quickly steered and then put to a draconian end, right? Where the government pulled a hard one on the people. They went full on dictatorship, and the people went away. They went into more sleeping rather than more awakening. These are all tactics deployed. These are not bless you, my love. Bless you, my love. Don't apologize for sneezing. She's cute when she sneezes. So the people are being led into certain directions, and stick around, because we're going to get into the solutions, right? We're going to get into how you actually make sure that you do stay on path, make sure that you don't get caught up. But once again, this pattern, I'm seeing it getting caught up in pretend solutions. False enlightenment and passivity, the neutralization mode. Those who see through fear and anger are redirected into spiritual complacency. You know, in the Christian rhetoric, it's turn the other cheek. It's like, what would Jesus do? We'll turn the other cheek. That's not my approach. You hit me. I mean, if you get to hit me, I'll hit you hard. I'll hit you back so hard, you'll never hit me again. Trust me. And I don't know whoever taught people that that's a non-spiritual thing to do. Well, fuck off. You come at me, I'll come at you much harder. And, this is sort of a common sense, very human thing to do. We've lost that. And so part of this greatest sleeping of people is that they are pushing, they're being pushed back further and further and further. We've seen this, once again, we've seen this during the last 4 years in the social reengineering, where they have pushed concepts on small children, toddlers, in kindergarten, in elementary school, in high school, over sexualization, to the brim, where they have normalized things that will never be normal or will never be natural. And people say, well, now it's gotten better. Really? What has really happened is there was a top-down push on the people by a movement that wanted to cause certain things. It was pushed on the people, and now it was a top-down pushback, right? It was a top-down pushback. People are led to believe that engagement with the world is a lower vibration, so they withdraw, leaving the control grid unchallenged. Isn't that the recipe? Don't engage with that. Just don't go there. I've seen these self-appointed spiritual gurus say this over and over again. Some are completely lost. Some have seen the light, like I said, and they've changed their tone, which I love, because it's actual empowerment. Because it actually says, well, we can do something about this, but we need to keep expanding our mind, our consciousness, and we need to keep awakening. Excuse me. Okay, this is now, really want you to pay attention. Take screenshots, read this later, share this with your friends and family. There's a playbook, okay? The playbook of mass de-escalation. How do you de-escalate a movement that goes towards you and your power if you are a small elite behind the curtain that knows numerically you're completely outpowered here? The system uses psychological operations to manage perception and prevent real change. The bread and circus psyop. Keep people entertained and distracted. Social media, streaming content, and digital addiction ensure people remain mentally occupied but physically passive. Have you ever wondered why they've pushed in an incredibly short amount of time? All the video platforms on people are encouraging everyone to create as much content as they possibly can, are producing more shows and more movies than ever before, of on average a lower quality, just really, really dark, low vibrational messaging over and over again. I mean, you scan the Netflixes of the world and you're just, where did wholesome movies go to? Where did good stories with positive storylines and a positive ending go? Where did the good people go? Not, oh, this is the dark psychopath and this is the hero, also a psychopath, just a little less dark. That's kind of how heroes are today. They're also psychopaths, just not quite as psychopathic as the dark psychopaths. So they're pushing this 24/7 entertainment, sports, movies, music, whatever it takes to keep people engaged. Because when people are engaged in passive consumption, they're not engaged in active thinking and active awakening. The pre-victory psyop. This, Jesus, I mean, these, I put this together, and every time that I see this, I just go, how can so many not see this? Make people feel like they're already winning, so they stop resisting. The system is collapsing on its own. Just wait. A secret plan is in motion. Just trust the process. Trust the plan. Well, let me tell you this. there was a very hopeful atmosphere in the state of Tennessee last year when the legislature passed a law that banned something that the world was telling us didn't even exist. Geoengineering. You know, flying up and spraying shit in the skies that lands on people, lands on the plants, lands on the soil, gets into the water. The you know, what people call chemtrails, and forget the name if the name triggers you. Geoengineering is real, proven beyond the shadow of a doubt. The Tennessee legislature passed a law that banned geoengineering. And we were looking up, starting in July of 24, this was going active, and we were looking up, and for maybe a week or 10 days or whatever, it looked like, oh, this is working. And then they just started doing it again. What the hell? Who's enforcing this? Well, then we realized that it was just, I mean, I don't know if the number is correct. Christine read up on it. She said it was 10,000 feet. That's the number. So you're not allowed to spray below 10,000 feet. But what fuck difference does it make if you spray at 10,000 feet or 12,000 feet? It's all coming down. And so it's still happening. And so we are in Maha and MAGA times, where the clouds above the MAGA and the Maha nation are still being produced. People are still being sprayed. This is all still happening, but people are screaming, we're winning. That is a sleeping, not awakening. You're not winning when you're being poisoned every day. You're not winning when the shit's coming down and it is causing fertility rates to drop. It's causing severe autoimmune diseases. It's causing neurological disorders. It's causing our food to be worthless. It's causing our soil to be worthless. But we're winning because Doge and Elon, right? I'm being sarcastic, but not really. To me, that is it's a regression. It's okay. So on day one, we were able to announce a $500 million Stargate AI project that and more mRNA in this nation, right? The full development of mRNA shots. I would go out on a limb here and say that the average Donald Trump voter and the average MAGA voter did not want that, did not necessarily, that was not a top priority on their agenda to have that. But that was announced on day one. We had the prospect of annexation of Greenland and Canada in the first days. We had let's clear out Gaza and build our own little technocratic paradise there. But who came out and said, okay, we are, as of this very moment, banning and criminally prosecuting every company, every pilot, every financier who's putting that shit in the skies? Where was that presser? Because I must have missed it. Does our health secretary know about this? Yeah, sure. You sure know he does. He's friends with Dane Wigington, who is the founder of geoengineeringwatch.org, who's been putting all the information out there for many, many years. They're friends. They talk all the time. Whenever something happens, Bobby Kennedy goes, Dane, what's going on? So where is that? Why is that not a top fucking priority? And why are people not demanding these things that are quick? You can't tell me that that's not a quick fix. I mean, you can ban the penny. That already happened. You can do all these things, but you can't as a president, because it is against the law, by the way, to do that. You can't, as the president, enact that and say, hey, it's not happening anymore. The savior complex, Sayab, encourage belief in external heroes who will fix everything, reinforcing an action. Insert the name. He will save us. This is not just America, by the way. It's not just Trump will save us. Orban will save us in Hungary. What's his name? Kickel will save us in Austria. The AfD will save us in Germany. Oh shit, they didn't win. Oh, they won, but they didn't get to actually take over the government. Listen, this is a psyop. The psyop is X will save us. X will fix it. That's the psyop. It doesn't matter who X is. It doesn't matter if they're the best person in the world. The psyop is X will save us. They could be freaking Jesus and it still wouldn't be true. I know our Christian listeners disagree, and I respect that. But I respectfully say that there is no entity or person that can save anyone against their free will, because we have free will. And since we have free will, I say that we can only truly lead ourselves to salvation, if you will, or lead ourselves to that particular state of self-empowerment. The energy drain psyop, a huge one, overwhelm people with so much chaos that they burn out and stop fighting, or misinformation for that matter. How much energy does it cost to go cipher through the entire bullshit of the media, of the false media, of the false prophets, to finally get to some level of truth, some level of facts? That when you think that this entire apparatus just came out of nowhere, a lot of these folks were trained, a lot of these folks were prepared, a lot of these folks are directly involved with the intelligence services of the world. Not all of them. Some are simply chosen and steered in a direction or incentivized. You know, look at Russell Rebrand. How many times has Russell rebranded himself? You know, sort of dark, slightly psychopathic, sex addict comedian, goes spiritual teacher and guru, you know, always very liberal, then goes spiritual teacher, political commentator, leaning towards the right, goes full-blown Roman Catholic Christian. Yeah, that's how many times do you rebrand yourself? Is it working for him? Let me give you an interesting perspective. When it came out, when these allegations against Russell Brand came out, what was it, last year, the year before? Probably early last year. Remember, accusations, sexual abuse, whatnot. YouTube demonetized him, and that then went away very, very quickly. And the next thing you know, Russell Rebrand appears all over the Rumble sphere, and all of a sudden he's going Christian. He's born again, and he becomes a Christian preacher teacher. The false revolution psyop, offer controlled opposition movements that let people vent frustration but never challenge core power structures. How can you tell me that for the entirety of human history, the greatest problems created in the world were created by the entity of governments? That's who created the most problems. Maybe people through them, maybe corporations through governments, maybe occult teachers through governments, but they use the government as the vehicle. And I'm not even an anti-government guy, but I'm telling you that all the mass atrocities, all the greatest killings in the world, all the greatest false flags and psyops were committed by one or another element of a government. So we're not allowed to rethink the very core structure of that, but we're being told that the next person that inhabits an office can fix it over and over and over and over again. The system was not broken. It was designed this way. And now they're simply going through a redesign. They're redesigning it to make it more efficient for their needs. I'm not saying that some good things aren't happening in the process. They always are. You need to give some candy to the people. You need to give them some good things. But it's a redesigning. It's fundamentally and faster than ever before marching in the same direction. And I'm not even saying that everyone involved in the government agrees with that or wants that. Not even at the higher echelons of power. I believe that. I believe there are people that very much don't want that. But they either feel powerless or don't see enough of the big picture or are too caught up in the moment to actually say slam the brakes. There's something fundamentally wrong here. That's the false revolution psyop. That's what we're in. The infiltration psyop, seed movements with gatekeepers who subtly limit the scope of inquiry and steer activists into safe, ineffective directions. Infiltration is the greatest tool of the destruction of opposition. Here's the thing. When you want to push down the opposition and you come guns blazing, that's obvious for everyone. You totally give away the plan. You don't do it like that. Only idiots do it like that. Smart people, evil, wicked, smart people, they go and send people in the movement, and those people often don't even know that they're being used. And then they slowly gain the trust of a movement. They bring positive aspects to the movement, often money. That's often what they're able to do. Oh, I have this big money guy in the background. It's my billionaire friend. He wants to support the cause. And he doesn't want to get involved. He just believes in what you guys are doing. So then that charismatic person who now has gained the trust, who now also brings in the money, slowly, surely adjusts some of the screws and goes, I think we'd be more effective if we focus on this here and that here and not talk so much about this. I've seen it a million times. And Christine and I had to literally overnight walk away from a big movement that we both co-created with sweat and tears against opposition. You can't imagine, because that was back in the day when they were watching everything, listening to everything, when they would show up at your door, and you know who they are, by the way. And we had to walk away overnight because movements got infiltrated, and people within our partners had rose-colored glasses and believed the naive stories they were told, and shit went down, and people went to prison for very, very long sentences. We walked away because we saw what was happening. It was happening quickly. And a powerful, very strong, beautiful, positive, life-affirming, conscious movement was shattered into a million pieces. And that's the power of infiltration. By the way, it works both ways. So, there's good infiltration, there's bad infiltration. You can go into a bad structure, and if you're good, you can start steering that in a different direction. The dilution psyop, that's part of this. Take a radical idea and water it down into a weak, corporate-approved version that changes nothing. Revolution becomes performative activism. Truth movements become conspiracy echo chambers that never take real action. This is sort of the let's just say a powerful idea in our time, still within the structure of what the founding fathers had in mind and the government, is libertarianism. It's not my preferred version of anything, because it still involves some sort of top-down control, but it's a very, very powerful idea. And I think guys like Ron Paul, Dr. Ron Paul, were instrumental in educating people on that, which means the radical reduction of government. This current thing that's happening appears to be that, but somehow it uses, in many ways, autocratic measures and to do that. And I'll give you an example. And it seems to be like a, how can I put that? It seems to be a trivial example, but by decree, the Gulf of Mexico was renamed into the Gulf of America very quickly. Like I said, one of those important things that was done right away, not getting rid of geoengineering, but let's rename the Gulf of Mexico, because, that changes a lot. So that was renamed. And the Associated Press, one of the biggest press agencies in the world, a horrific organization, by the way, don't get me wrong, refused to call it the Gulf of America, but kept calling it the Gulf of Mexico. And they were decommissioned, so they can't go into the White House. They were stripped of their press credentials. There might be more to the story, but this very move, what does it say? What does it say when you're saying, if you are not going to use the language that we want you to use, we're going to take away your press credentials. Well, that's by by standards just 2 years ago, the same people who are cheering for that would have gone crazy, because that previous guy in the previous false administration, they had all kinds of language that they wanted the press to use and they wanted everyone to use, and gender neutral language and all that, and certain people never complied with that. So what would you have said if 3-4 years ago, 2 years ago, the White House would have said, because a reporter, Newsmax or Fox or whatever reporter would not have used the approved gender neutral language, that they can't be in the White House press corps anymore? Those are things that give away on a slightly trivial level that there is a way of, there's a thinking of, we are going to rule here and we're just going to make a judgment call, and that has nothing to do with libertarianism or with freedom or with sovereignty. You don't make people see the idiocy of something by forbidding it. You challenge it with right thinking. You challenge it with proper error-free thinking, and you show the people the truth. That's the only way how we do it in the long run. You can't mandate common sense, and you can't outlaw things that you don't like. I'm not talking about violent things, but ideas or concepts, right? Like, people are now beginning to call in greater and greater ways for banning, even transitioning. Who am I to tell an adult person how they can live or not live? I would think that in many instances, it might be unethical of a doctor and a surgeon to perform these surgeries if they see that that's clearly an unstable person and that they're psychologically in a very bad place and that it would actually need that help first. Now, we can argue about that. That's an ethical question for the profession of medicine. But who are we to dictate to people how they can live? There are boundaries when it comes to children. Naturally, that's abuse. That's going, that's taking away the sovereignty of a being that does not have yet the full capability of make those choices. And I full-heartedly believe, as a father of 3, having raised 3 children, I can tell you that a 12, 13-year-old does not have the capacity to make such life-altering choices, ever. But we're in this stage where everything is happening so fast, and where people wholeheartedly believe that what they see is all good and it's leading in a great direction, and they pull back. That's the greatest danger that could possibly happen. They quit questioning. And the problem is, when they question, they get attacked for that. Because the echo chamber says, can't you just finally shut up? We got him in power now. We got Elon now. We got Doge now. We got Cash Patel now. We got Pam Bondi now. We got Pete Hegseth now. We got these folks. What are you worrying about? Go enjoy your cheap gas. Go, it's going to come down. Go buy a house. Go be a good American and consume. How to break this process of the great asleeping, of complacency, and allowing for this final implementation of a system that is oppressive in its very core. I'm not saying that all the people that are involved in this are bad. They might not have enough power to do something about it because they're lone wolves, or they might also be misguided about what the system that's being implemented really is. But let's talk about what are some of the solutions. Stop waiting for external saviors. And this is a solution that was as real in the year 900 as it is real now. No one is coming to save you. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Be your own liberator. What you will find is that the more that you help yourself, generally speaking, the more help seems to appear. That's been our perception. Recognize the manipulation patterns. The system's biggest weapon is deception. Once you see the tricks, they lose power. The tricks are the same tricks, folks. They don't change. The trick book is only so big. The language might change a little bit, and the way that the tricks are being pulled because the technology changes, but the trick is the trick. There's only 5 or 6 ways to do it. Figure it out. Read the books on the psyops. Read how it works. It's not difficult. But then you become you move from being an emotional reactor to a wholesome thinker and actually a co-creator. Transcend fear without becoming passive. Fear locks you in submission, but false enlightenment locks you in inaction. The answer is courageous action rooted in higher awareness. It's not one or the other. If what you learn, if finding a greater level of truth does not lead to some changes in your life, something's wrong. Shift from knowledge to embodiment. People say knowledge is power. No, the application of knowledge is power. Knowledge in and by itself is interesting. That's all that it is. Shift from knowledge to embodiment. Knowing is not enough. Action is what matters. If your awakening isn't producing real change in your life, you're still asleep. Or you are in the process of sleepening, falling into a slumber. Break the algorithm. Stop feeding the digital machine. Act in real world. Build, create, connect outside the control grid. Do I understand the irony of coming to you from a screen through this internet thing and through? Yes, of course I see the irony in that. We're using this tool because it allows us, and you and all of us, to process great amounts of observations, knowledge, newfound or old found wisdom and truth, and shape it into something that inspires people into empowerment. We are not the ones. We're not a savior. I'm not a guru. I'm not a savior. None of those things. This allows us in this very, very beautiful but short energy window to shift things around, to shift thinking, to shift processing, to shift perceptions. What people do with that is their own freaking responsibility. Do not comply with your own enslavement ever. You are an infinite being. If you can hear what I'm saying, and if you can comprehend the words that I'm saying, then you do have consciousness, our spirit. You're not an NPC. You're not a non-player character. Non-player characters don't watch it. They don't know what we're talking about. I might as well speak Mandarin. But you can hear me. You feel me. You feel. Do not comply with your own enslavement ever. If you are an infinite being, then what consequences could you possibly fear that would make you do the wrong thing over the right thing? That would make you say yes when you mean no. Remember? This year, a big example. Create a life that is radically sovereign, self-sustaining, and self-directed. What does that mean? I did not know that needed so much explanation. What does radical mean? Radical means from the root. People think that means something bad. Radical doesn't mean bad. It just means real change. It changes at the root of things. Radically. So sovereignty, self-sustaining, self-directed. No one, absolutely no one, if you're an adult being, has the right to decide over you without your consent. No one has the right to tell you what to do or not to do without your consent. That's an important equation. But that knowing doesn't mean much when you don't have the skills and the knowledge, the skills, and the will to put it into action, which means if you know how to do things for yourself, if you know how to meet your own needs, then guess what you don't need? Some external savior, some external controller, or somebody who says, we're going to help you, we're going to give you all these things, but you're going to do what we tell you to do. If you can do things for yourself, you don't need that. Most of the Amish don't need that. They know how to do shit. You know, they don't have to comply with much of anything. They live their lives the way that they see fit. Whether that's good or right or wrong, that's for them to decide, not for us. But unless all of our seeking, all of our truth finding does not result in real freaking changes, not just in our thinking, in our actions, in our habits, in our lifestyles, if that doesn't happen, we're not awakening, we are sleeping. If we still think that the next election is going to fix things, we are sleeping, folks. We are sleeping. You know, the guy in Ukraine, I think Zelensky and the people around him, they knew that folks wouldn't support that any longer. So he called up the elections, you know, because they thought, oh, this might, if we have an election, you know, this might actually go a way that we can't control. So why don't we call it off? So what did they do? They said, now that it could matter, we're just going to not do it. We're just, why were we doing it? And then you have guys like Klaus Schwab that have been openly discussing this, and others, by the way, because it's all connected. It's all an idea of, yeah, we might not need elections in the future. We might not need that because we can already anticipate what people want. We know where they're going, so we can just do it. And we don't have to have that. And I know that Christians call me out for that, and they say you didn't get the context, but there were 2 or 3 occasions during the campaign where Trump said, my beautiful Christians, you just come out and vote this once, we're gonna fix it so good you're not gonna have to do it anymore. And they say that has to do with Christians, usually traditionally evangelicals, they don't want to vote. I don't know. And how can you be so sure? How can you be so sure that they don't have something different in mind? I might be wrong, and I don't think that elections are going to go away in America anytime soon. Things might change. I think they will be drastically different. Maybe we're just going to paper ballots and watermarks, and that's going to be great, and it's going to work. I'm all for it. But all these things are largely outside of our control still. And here's where it becomes really interesting. As long as we depend and are dependent on this system, we have little power over it, and we feel sort of powerless over it. And here's the paradox. Once we become radically self-sustainable and independent, and I don't understand why that isn't like the most important life goal. But once we become that, we're free. We're actually free. Even in the physical sense, we're sort of free. The people who are in that position can usually help achieve greater changes in their communities, in their local communities, because they don't have to fear and worry, and I'm going to upset the city council, and then they might come and do, and they're not, I'm not going to get my this and that and grant and whatnot. If you can take care of yourself beautifully and you have a community around you, well, things shape up very differently. So the Great Awakening isn't just knowing that we live in a construct and that some self-appointed elites, psychopathic elites are steering things, and that we're in this great rock and roll era where things are shifting so fast. That's cool. That's important. But what does it lead to? Does it lead to greater questioning of who you really are? Does it lead to exploring your own true powers? Does it lead to oh, if the grocery store closes tomorrow, I'll be fine. You know, I know how to do things. I know how to grow a garden. I might not be growing livestock or having livestock here, but you know, my friend's a farmer and he does that. And you know, I give him this, he gives me that, whatever. These are practical, doable solutions. And where two or more gather and start talking and start throwing around ideas, usually some cool ideas come up of how this can be accomplished. People say, I don't have the money. Well, most people didn't have the money to begin with. Most people that I know that have done these things didn't have the money to begin with. They might have come from poor families, or they have lost everything. They lost their businesses, whatever. Well, they found a way, because when you're authentic, when you're truthful, when you have skills and or ideas, that has value. And in our world, value equals value. So when you can give value, whoever receives that value is willing to give value back in a different form. Let's say money or gold or land or lumber or whatever. And so our thinking needs to shift. This is not about seeing or weathering a storm. This is about completely altering the way that we live from this craziness that we were in into something that actually suits our spirits, suits our souls, and that allows for our families to be together and thrive and be happy and joyous as good as we can while we're in this construct. You know, if we don't talk about these things and if we don't question this, we live in a perpetual psychological operation. Like I said, I don't remember a time where some significant psyop wasn't running on the population. And the difference was that people who lived out in the country and didn't have access to mass media and didn't have, okay, now they do. Now they are plugged into the grid 24/7. And so we live in perpetual psychological operations. And if we don't see it, we're being run by those operations. We have to radically free ourselves from those, step up to the plate, and sovereignize ourselves. Not to fight them, but to actually, best case scenario, show that a completely different and better way is available and doable. Because that should be the goal. The goal should be to, by example, by actually be in a perpetual state of awakening, show the asleepiners that there's a different path, that it's worth it, that it can be done, and that it might change the course of history. All right, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. We're going to go over to locals, inspired.locals.com, where we switch it up and we talk about some really deep stuff. It's very community oriented. I love that. Great community. Wonderful folks. And then we talk about einkorn and sourdough bread, the great carbohydrate wars of the Nolan household. If you missed that, and sometimes, you know, just talk about our dogs in the creeks and in the snow and stuff like that. It's kind of like family. All right, my friends, we love you. We appreciate you. Oh, inspired.locals.com. Excuse me. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back with you again very, very soon.
Listen, right now you could be only a few clicks away from experiencing something amazing, something that has changed thousands of lives all over the world. I'm talking about a high consciousness field similar to those at pilgrimage sites and sacred places. It's where people go to heal, to connect, and to become the best possible version of themselves. With FLFE, you can bring such a high consciousness field into your home right now. It's a spiritual quantum technology based on the work of Nikola Tesla. Better sleep, more energy, greater well-being, improved finances, electrosmog mitigation. These are only some of the things people on the FLFE service are experiencing. Try it now for 15 days completely free of charge, no credit card needed. Just click on a link down below to start your free, no strings attached FLFE trial right now.